Good evening and welcome to a special edition of On Stage. I'm Holly Deuel, and as you can see, we're not in our regular studio. We're out here on the Bosque with our special guest today, José Garcia. Now, José Garcia, some of you may recognize, has become world famous for doing his show TITO. I'm just going to snicker at that. But we've got a real good show lined up for you. The first thing that we're going to look at is a piece from his show. Before we get into that, I want you to tell me a little bit about how TITO got started, because I know it's been around for a long time, and that you're really the creator behind this show.
Yeah, I'm the creator behind the theater part of it.
Right.
I'm not the writer. It was written by Rómolo Arellano, who's a writer, a poet from Arroyo Hondo up near Taos.
Is this a contemporary person or somebody?
Yes,
from...
he's a friend of mine.
Oh, okay.
He's in his mid-40s at this point. And Rómolo wrote it about a real person whose name was Tele, who lived in Arroyo Hondo and who was an alcoholic, and who died probably about 4 years ago from alcoholism. And Rómolo wrote it as a narrative poem, which the original piece was about 40 to 45 minutes long.
Now, did he originally intend for the poem to be performed?
No, he didn't.
Okay.
He didn't. He wrote it as a work of literature. In 1980, I think it was in 1985, in the summer, I went up to Taos and I got in contact with Rómolo again. We had known each other back from UNM when I was a student there. And
we're laughing
yes.
because Jose and I also knew each other at UNM in the music department. We won't talk about that. It's a small state.
Right. But Rómolo read the piece to me, and I was very impressed with it, so I took it, a copy of it, and I lived with it for about a month and thought about it. And then I made suggestions to him in expanding upon the piece.
Now, before we go on, how is it that you got in touch with Rómolo? Did you just go up to visit him? Did he know you were a performer?
I went up. I went up actually to look for galleries for my artwork. I'm a visual artist, and it just so happened that I got in contact with a mutual friend of ours who knew a lot of people up in Taos and knew the galleries, and she told me. I asked her how Rómolo was doing, and she told me that he had this piece, and she took me out to see him. And one thing led to another, and not only did I get a gallery, but I got a piece of a piece for the theater, which was great.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So then what happened? What was next?
Well, then, after I made suggestions to Rómolo about the piece, about expanding upon things, for instance, he had mentioned in the very beginning of the piece about a woman, but he only touched upon it very lightly. But he never said anything else about what his relationships were like, what Tito's relationships were like with women. Mm-hmm. So I suggested that Rómolo expand upon that. He'd also mentioned his best friend Matias, who was a very outrageous character, and I asked him to expand upon that and expand upon his mother, whom he had mentioned, and some other people in the play. At this time, it wasn't a play, of course. And over a course of about a summer, Rómolo wrote new works, and he wrote them in sections, and he sent them to me, and I edited them, and I put everything together. And so out of a 40-minute piece, we ended up with about an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes worth of material.
Did his writing change once he knew that he was sending this off to somebody who was looking at it as performance material? Did it change the nature or the tone of the piece? No,
it didn't, because the original piece, even though it was written as literature, it was written in such a way that it's a man talking to you, to anybody. It's as if you were driving through this little village of Arroyo Hondo, and you may have stopped and asked directions, and here's this guy, takes you in, and he starts telling you the story of his life. And that's the way it's written. So Rómolo just continued in that vein, just talking. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't have to do much editing on the original piece. I did quite a bit after that, because it was all new material. And then I put it I arranged it in such a way that I felt it would be strongest on stage. And there were no stage directions, there was nothing, so I got to do anything I wanted to do with the piece, including designing the set. And there's music in the piece. Rómolo had originally included songs in the piece, and then later on I added even some more music. So there's a total of 4 alabados, which are songs of praise, or they go back actually to 13th century Spain, and then 2 norteños, or rancheras, that I sing, including Tito's theme song, which is Flor de las Flores, and it's a very popular song in New Mexico. It's Flor de las Flores, flor de mi amor, vente conmigo y dame tu amor, and it goes through the whole song. And everybody knows that song. In New Mexico, it seems. Anybody that knows music of New Mexico.
But that was important that the music was highly recognizable so that people could own it. As their
Yeah,
own.
because as Rómolo talked about that song, and he talked about the song Flor de las Flores is like a borracho song, a drunkard song, because it's about your lost love, about you're in love with this woman but you couldn't quite get her, and that's a favorite song among borrachos. And so that's, every time Tito makes a transition from one thought or one mood to the next mood, he goes back into his song. Sometimes it's happy when he goes into the song, sometimes he's depressed, and the song brings him out of his depression.
So it keeps repeating throughout.
Throughout
and so
the piece.
That's one of the things that the audience then tags is like a scene change or a mood change.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And the audience loves the song. They pick up on it. When I did it in Scotland, people, almost everywhere I do it, people start singing it at the end. When I did it in Scotland, in fact, when I was leaving Scotland with all the friends that I had met there, I was on the bus ready to go down to London, and they all gave me a send-off by singing the song to me, and they remembered it. It was great.
That's terrific.
Yeah,
That's terrific.
yeah.
Do you find that, now you've had this piece you worked with for what, 4 odd years or so?
About 3 years now.
Do you find that it changes a lot? I mean, you've performed it a lot, and there's, you know, you were telling me you perform it and then it sits for a while. Has it gone through a lot of metamorphosis?
Yes, absolutely. It's changed because I've changed. I keep getting better. I become a more mature artist, and the piece, every time I leave it and I come back to it, I'm a little bit more experienced, and I see it with a new light. And also, every time I come back to it, it's fresh for me again, and I'm anxious to get back to the piece. It has, when I first did the piece, I first opened it in Taos in October 1985, and I didn't even have a set at that time. I did it at the Mabel Dodge Luhan house and on these steps, and it was just a dining room, and I just performed on the steps.
Guerrilla
And I
theater.
had, yeah, and I had a guitarist playing in the background for me, and now it's changed so that I have the character of Death, La Muerte, who is on the stage, and she never says a word, but she sings. She sings 2 songs. One is called Considera Alma Perdida, which means consider lost soul, and it's a beautiful song, alabado, about purgatory.
But why the character of Death? Why not just go and replace the guitarist? What made you choose that direction?
Well, guitar is nice and sets a mood, but what that does is it sets a mystery, an incredible mystery and aura behind the whole piece, because the piece is a very, very serious piece. Now, there's a lot of comedy in the piece, but ultimately it's about a man's life and death, and about his struggle with alcoholism and his struggle with trying to fight or trying to maintain his identity in a culture that's changing.
So like Flores de las Flores, does Death keep coming back throughout the piece?
Death comes throughout the piece, yes, absolutely. In the very beginning of the piece, you don't know who she is, but she comes on, she sets the stage, and she's singing this song, Considera Alma Perdida. It's Considera alma perdida, que en aqueste paso fuerte dieron sentencia de muerte, oh Redentor de la vida. And then there's several verses.
What do the words
beautiful
mean?
Piece. It's consider lost soul. It's, instead of going into all the words, there are a lot of words, but he's talking about you're going to go to purgatory, and that how Christ suffered for you, and you have to always know that he could come, that death could come for you at any time. And it's about the suffering of Christ and this martyrdom of the suffering of Mary for Christ, and it's really reminding us of this transitory existence, which is perfect for Tito, because Tito he's on his last, what's happening with this piece is he's facing his life for the last time. And so death is like it's as if death is pulling the strings for him, and she's setting the whole situation up for him and making it possible for him to face himself and his life and his death for the last time before she takes him. And this is not a scary death, not in my view. It's a benevolent death. It's a death that is a nurturing kind of a death. And so she appears in the beginning, she sets the stage for him, and then she's gone. She reappears in the scene that we're going to see, the first scene. She reappears, but she appears in taking the attitude of Tito's grandmother, because the abuelo, the grandfather, he's just buried, the grandfather, and she comes in and...
Okay, let's stop.
Yeah.
Let's look at this, and then
Okay.
once the audience has seen it, I'm going to ask
All
you
right,
some more
fine.
about where this is. Okay, so this is the piece about the grandfather. Let's take a look at that.
When mi abuelo died, he made mi abuela promise that she would bury him abajo del arbolito de manzana. But the priest said, No, I will not go pray for him over there. You have to bury him in the Campo Santo. I will not pray for him over there. So los hermanos de la morada came, and they prayed for him all night, and they sang alabados. Entonces, en la mañana, they buried him abajo del arbolito. There was one alabado they kept singing over and over. It's an alabado for the souls in el purgatorio. I can still hear them singing. Por los grillos y cadenas y prisiones infinitas, saca, Señor, de las penas a las ánimas benditas. Oh, dulcísima María, Madre de consolación, pídele a tu Hijo precioso que esta alma tenga perdón.
Okay, so that was the part with the grandfather. Now tell me where that's fitting into the story, and perhaps why the grandfather is important.
Okay, let me preface that with why the grandfather is so important. The grandfather is the symbol of tradition for Tito, and the symbol of the culture for Tito. And there's a beautifully written section, which was from the original piece that Rómolo wrote, which is about 20 minutes long, all about his grandfather, him remembering his grandfather when he was a little boy. And his grandfather planted this arbolito de manzana, which is an apple tree. And he tells Tito, I want you to take care of this arbolito. I want you to water it con agua de la acequia. And you always take care of this arbolito, because all of us, we go through this world and we take many things from it, but we hardly ever put anything back. But if we can leave just one arbolito, many people will eat from it, and it will make them happy. And that's the essence of this whole thing. And then he talks about his grandfather gathering the seeds from the fields and putting them in this little bolsa or pouch he had, and he always took them home, and it was the herbs and the roots and everything of healing, and the importance of the land and the importance of the water, which is the basis of that culture. And then his grandfather, that scene was where his grandfather dies, and los hermanos de los penitentes, de la morada, or the penitent brothers, come and they pray for his grandfather, and they bury him underneath the apple tree because the priest wouldn't bury him underneath the apple tree. He says you have to bury him in the graveyard, in the Camposanto.
Right.
And so La Muerte comes in there, but she's coming in as if she were the grandmother.
Now, is that the first time that we actually see La Muerte?
That's the second time, because she comes in the beginning of the piece, sings before Tito ever enters. She sets the stage for him, and then he comes in. So that's the second time we see her. Then she goes over and we have an altar. I made an altar and a small piece, and there's a Christ figure hanging over the altar, and she lights candles, 3 candles on the altar, and then she sits there. And by the end of the act, Tito sees, he sees his grandfather again. He has a vision of his grandfather. He's out cleaning the acequia de la plaza, which is a yearly event of cleaning the ditches out to water. And he has a vision of his grandfather reappearing, and because there's a fire, and in the fire he sees his grandfather, and his grandfather says, "What has happened con el arbolito? What has happened con el agua? What has happened con la tierra?" And he takes his bolsa and he throws it across the field, and it loses all the remedios and the fruits that he had found in the bolsa, and then his grandfather disappears. And that's a traumatic experience for Tito. He just loses it there, and he just starts drinking, and that's really where we see the beginning of the decline of Tito there. And
so is this kind of like a flashback so that the audience knows why Tito is where we're at now as we see him in the decline of his life?
He's telling the audience, this is what happened to me.
So it's the loss of the roots of the family and that whole culture.
Right.
And association with the land.
Absolutely. What he talks about right before that dream is, he says, after his grandfather died, his uncle, his tío Horacio, who lived in Denver, came and he sells the land because his grandfather left him to the land because he doesn't care about the land.
Yeah.
He sells the land to outsiders who come in, they fence off the land, they tear down his grandfather's house, and they cut down the arbolito. And that's devastating to Tito.
Yeah. I think we should mention at this point that the actress that you saw doing El Muerte is Yvonne Orona. Now, Yvonne's been with you, we were talking earlier, and she was one of the first performers.
Yes.
And now she's working with you full-time on this?
Yeah, whenever we do it. She's working with me
you
again
have a
on the
steady
piece
partner
and doing La
now.
Muerte. Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay, now let's talk about, you gave us a little clue that you've taken this to Scotland, and you were saying earlier that you actually have shown this in 3 different countries. Let's start with Scotland, since we mentioned that before. How the hell how did you get Tito to Scotland?
Well, in 1984, I went with La Compañía de Teatro de Albuquerque to the Edinburgh International Festival, which is the largest theater and international festival in the world. It's a tremendous thing. And there is so much happening in Scotland in the arts. It's amazing. It's wonderful. And I made a friend there, so I said, well, I have to go back. That's it. I'm going back. So I went on my own expense. I saved money, and I went to see my friend, and also to try and break into the art scene in Scotland. And I took some artwork with me, and I took my mask with me, and I showed up and started knocking on doors and saying, "Here I am," going to theater companies and saying, "I'd like to perform this for you." And I got
every time you walked in, you had to do a bit of Tito for him, right?
Well, a lot of people, I just left my reviews, because by that time I'd done Tito for more than 2 years. I'd opened La Compañía de Teatro season, 1987 season. I'd gotten tremendous reviews, and so that was easier. It helped. But then I got into one of Glasgow's leading theater venues, which is a very, very reputable theater. They bring acts from all over the world in, so I was very lucky. And I was,
obviously you were very talented.
Well, I also was lucky to get in because they're crammed with things, and they had a cancellation, and I got in, and I auditioned for the director, and I got 2 performances in late January there, and I got a tremendous review from the Glasgow Herald, and the response to it was wonderful. People loved the piece, and Scottish people understand that kind of displacement of their culture and displacement of their land.
So they saw a lot of similarities between
Absolutely.
what had happened to the Scots with the British and the Hispanics here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you mentioned you've also been to Miami, and you got to play to your most difficult audience, the Cubans.
Yeah. we just got back from Miami a few weeks ago for the third annual Hispanic Theater Festival, and La Compañía was only one of 2 companies outside of Miami to go to to be invited to this festival. And we performed, and we had 3 performances, and primarily to Cuban audiences. And the Cubans were actually a very difficult audience to perform for. Number one, many of them don't speak any English, and their politics tends to be right-wing, whereas Rómolo's or Tito would be more on the other side.
So they must have seen Tito as a threat to all the things that they had been really working
yes,
for.
I think so. They tend to be more bourgeois, class conscious. Tito's lower class. He's an alcoholic.
And that's interesting because it seems like, any sort of subculture should really want to support arts that elevate subcultures, I mean, the fact that there is this wonderful piece of Hispanic work that is on tour and is getting recognition, it doesn't really make sense to me in some ways that would be sort of
Miami is funny because what the audiences are used to there is fluff. They're used to cabaret. They're used to really
all that drug money down
there. Nothing very interesting. But the people who are running the festival, Teatro Avante, were trying to bring serious theater in. And as the director of the festival said, we're tired of giving these people a Cuban monologue. We want to give them something else.
Okay, we need to stop here for a minute. We have another piece to look at, and then we'll be back and we'll be talking about the calendar. So let's go ahead and just take a look at another piece from Tito. This is the drunk and his journey into hell. Take a look at that.
Well, I've been a whiner for a long time, so I'll probably go to hell. I've often wondered what hell must be like because they tell me that when you die, the soul leaves the body, and the soul is just like air, so I can't figure out how it can burn. Me and Matias, we once did an experiment to figure this out. I said to Matias, oye, compa, I'll catch some air with my hands, and then I'll let it go, and you light a match to see if it will burn. Well, I caught the air, and Matias lit the match. But nothing burned, except for his shirt sleeve. It burned a little, because Matias's hands, they shake too much. Then I said, well, if air doesn't burn and the soul is just like air, then it can't burn either. So they must be telling us a lie. So me and Matias, we sat down to figure out a lie. We thought for a long time and decided that hell must be like a place where you can't do the things you love the most. And then for us, hell would be like a place where you could never go to Los Compadres. Or where you could never see a pretty woman like Feliz. Or where you could never hear a banda play. Flor de la flor. Well, that would be a pretty bad hell. Maybe if they would let me hear Flor de las Flores once every 100 years, I could stand it, huh?
Well, this is Tito. This is at the end of the piece, very close to the end of the piece, and Tito is coming to terms with his life, and he knows he's an alcoholic. He's admitting he's an alcoholic, but he brings the humor back into it. Constantly, he gets very serious, and then he brings the humor back
Yeah.
into it. And right after this piece, Tito really says, I'm dying,
Yeah.
I know I'm dying, and
So
I'm
it's kind of
sad.
finding that inner peace, you know,
Yeah.
the sort of the struggle and the letting go.
Right.
And so that's real important.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay, so tell us where you're taking Tito next.
Well,
Tell us your big news.
we just received a grant from New Mexico Arts Division to tour Tito throughout northern New Mexico. We'll do that in the fall. We're trying to set up a Midwest tour for the fall. We're booked for Yuma, Arizona in the fall. We're booked in Santa Fe in the fall. We've got a lot of stuff going. And what really we're pushing for at this point is within the next year to 2 years of trying to cover as much area in this country as we can in terms of touring.
Great. Jose, thank you so much. It
Thank
really
you.
was nice being out here in the Bosque to
Yes,
do the interview. I
very
really
much.
appreciate it. And good luck with Tito.
Thank
and
you.
I'd like to check in with you again and find out, you know, where you're going. We can do Tito Part 2. Okay, we're going to move along to the arts calendar section. This is where we let you know everything that's going on in the theater. This will be dubbed later in the studio, so I'm just going to say good night. I'm Holly Deuel. Be sure to tune in 2 weeks from tonight when we are going to take a look at 2 of the cast members in the Rep East production of Under Milkwood, which is a beautiful play by Dylan Thomas being performed at the Rep East, where La Compañía used to have their theater. So tune in 2 weeks from tonight. Good night.